This week in games, the Wonder Woman game is in trouble, Roblox is under investigation, and Rooster Teeth has returned. This is the Two Penny Gamescast. What's poppin', players? Welcome back to the Two Penny Gamescast, episode 238. I am your host, Tavin Bothel, here with my good friend and co-host. Say hello to the people, Connor Elliott.
My name's Connor Elliott, and I am the co-host of the Two Penny Gamescast.
Connor, how's your week been, friend?
For me, it's been good. I mean, I moved in my younger brother to a new apartment, moved a couch, made some videos.
There you go.
Hey,
yeah,
there you
you've
go.
been doing quite a bit of content. You
Yeah.
know, you've been keeping up on the Substacks as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
This is, of course, a lighter news week. We'll get into all of that. So, not as many as we maybe would have liked. But, you kept up on the Substacks. You did a lot of breakout videos. Very good work this week, Connor. Very good work.
I have, though, overall been upset, angry this week. Because recently, I've talked about it before on the podcast, and it's kind of a new recent development. I was redundant there, but you get my point. Recently, Trump announced that the ethnic cleansing is going to happen in Gaza.
Oh,
He
yeah.
definitively said that we're going to make it into a Riviera, which is basically a place where rich people can go and play around. And he just said today that the people can't go back to Gaza. And he says that because it's destroyed, they can't. And so they're going to build things that aren't their homes because they're ethnically cleansing them. And, this is also in the midst of Hamas had just basically announced that they're withdrawing from the ceasefire or something like that, because basically Israel has been these past couple weeks, while it's been in effect, been doing bombing campaigns, been killing people. I think just recently in the West Bank, there was a pregnant woman, 8-month-old pregnant woman who was just killed. I think she was shot recently. But that violence is ramping up even more so now, and I think we're about to get into yet another point of darkest time in American history in their role in ethnically cleansing Gaza, because so far it seemed like nothing's stopping that. And other international communities, even if they could do something, especially places like Britain, don't seem to have an incentive to do so. So, just from those comments and the dedication to effectively eradicating these people, it's going to get a lot worse. So I've been really angry seeing developments come out over and over again. Basically the society is filled with moral degeneracy, and it's, very plain to see now more than ever. So, if there's protests that go around nearby you, or if you have money that you can spend, donate it, protest, because that's effectively the only thing you can do, the only thing I can do. And it sucks because it's not much of an effect on anything, but you can at least say that you weren't standing idly by while horrors went on, not only by your government, but with your money, with your tax dollars. And, there's going to be some bad stuff coming out relatively soon if it goes on this same path, which it seems to be the case. So that news has been angering in my mind every single time I think about it. And there hasn't been much stuff in terms of video games this week to think about, so that's been a big preoccupation. It's been preoccupying my mind a lot, and it's bad. That's all I'll say. It's an understatement. But
Very, very well said, I'll say. And,
was it well said?
And for the most, definitely by your standards, but yeah, it was quite well said. And boy, oh boy, you're throwing the internet warriors for a loop this week. Let me tell you what.
You gotta stay consistent with your ideas, and my consistent idea is to not kill innocent civilians
Right.
or ethnically cleanse them, and
Right.
also to not be racist. Now, some things might be. Go watch a video later on in the week. Context matters, but Tavin's been, we're going to be dealing with some comments. Hopefully they're comments that are constructive and not
They won't be.
They won't be.
They won't be.
Maybe they will. These things can take off in a positive way, but this, combined with, you should put this part out before the other breakout.
You think so?
No.
I don't think it matters.
I don't think it matters either.
Let's talk about video games. Oh man. Okay. Listen, I do want to buffer. I agree with everything you said. All right, I agree on that case. I agree with that. It was unexpected. I wasn't expecting you to go that route.
I know. I didn't tell you anything.
That was a hard left turn.
Yeah.
Definitely something you'd been thinking about for the last 2 days. So
More than that, unfortunately.
But I love and appreciate that you got it off, and I always want to give the space for that. But boy, a minute into this shit, yeah, that algorithm's not going to like us today. So
You know what? And by that note, but I should have probably waited for that reason alone.
Yeah.
Get
So
the
if you made it this far into the video, please like, subscribe, and share with a friend, because we normally just talk about video games, and we would appreciate the help in getting that algorithm circulated. Because, of course, this is the Penny Games Cast, where each week me and Connor come to you with the nerdy news you need to know concerning the video game industry. We each come to you with 2 topics, 2 pennies, if you will, and we give you our 2 cents on them. You can find this show every Tuesday, 8 a.m. Central Time, youtube.com/@TwoPennyGames, and mainstream podcast services of your choice. All of the stories that we read on today's show have been written by one Connor Elliott himself. You can read those stories yourself over at TwoPennyGamesNews.substack.com, which a link is also in the description for that, to the main Substack channel. So make sure you go and check that out. We really, really appreciate that. Follow us on all social platforms and all podcasting platforms. Make sure you rate us 5 stars, please. It really does help get the algorithm circulating our videos and seeing a lot of growth. We've seen more growth, Connor, pound for pound in the last month and some change than we've ever seen on the platform before. We've gotten, we are exponentially growing even faster. I know the number would tell you that we're very small, but exponentially we are growing faster and faster. So please help us achieve our dreams and getting us to be able to do this a little bit more full time and to have, higher quality content at some point. We'd really appreciate that support. Make sure you follow us on the social medias. Links are in the description down below. Follow,
a lot of things.
That was a little heavy. All right. And of course, we record all of our podcasts live Monday, twitch.tv/TwoPennyGames. So make sure you hit us, follow us on twitch.tv/TwoPennyGames in order to see all of that. Has anybody followed today? Let's find out. No, you can't. See, plenty of people we need over here to follow. So make sure you follow us over there. You were saying?
Join the Twitch chat, because we host these things live all the time, and then you can hang out with Einkun while he talks about what pizza he's got.
Indeed. 1Z_ also said hey earlier. Hey, we missed you, but it's in there. So hop into the Twitch chat. Come talk to us about video games or anything else that's on your mind.
News time, I guess, huh?
Fuck Donald Trump, bro.
Yeah,
God,
seriously.
This guy fucking sucks.
Yeah, worse than before.
Oh, so much worse than before.
But hey, don't worry. He did get rid of the DI stuff. So the country solved, That was the problem we were all facing.
This is you again. This is you. They don't understand how dry humor works, Connor. They don't understand that you're very dry with your things.
And that's why you do it, so you teach them, and then you realize, hey, if you didn't get it the first time, you're an idiot. So get it the next time.
You're making these keyboard warriors do backflips this week.
Good. Hey, frankly, if you spend a lot of time doing that, you deserve to be thrown for a loop, Spice it up a little bit. Instead of doing the same stuff all the time. Comment section, type, get angry, get upset. Maybe get upset at what we're about to cover here. Jesus. Good.
You just got me so choked up because I care so much. Connor, let's get into our first topic of the day. Your first penny of the day. Go ahead, take it away, my friend.
Wonder Woman game project rebooted. Warner Bros. Game lineup found lacking. Warner Bros. Previously announced a Wonder Woman video game was rebooted last year and shifted directors according to inside sources. This comes off the back of the announcement of Multiverse's planned shutdown at the end of May. In development from Middle-earth Shadow of Mordor studio Monolith Productions, the Bloomberg article reports Wonder Woman has so far cost $100 million. Interviews held with current and former developers pin the blame on the shoulders of recently departed, that means they left the company, Games chief David Haddad, whose incumbency was marked by a lack of vision for the company. Executives were originally more interested in the Shadow of Mordor's team's next franchise being attached to existing properties like adaptations of DC Comics material, hence the focus on a Wonder Woman title. Wonder Woman will be a more traditional action-adventure game, a change from the initial plans of instituting a version of Shadow of Mordor's beloved Nemesis system, where encounters with Wonder Woman's opponents could result in her potentially befriending them. With the game's uncertain release years away and an end to support for the live service titles Suicide Squad: Kill the Justice League and Multiverses, Warner Bros. Have no major releases slated for the foreseeable future, with President of Global Streaming and Games, J.B. Perrette, insisting they'll remain, quote, bullish, end quote, on video game productions. Quote, we'll get right back to profitability in 2025, says Perrette. We won't get back to profitability. We won't get back to the profitability we want to get back to in the next 2 to 3 years. It will take 2 to 3 years to rebuild, reset to levels we want to be at, but the bounce back is immediate as far as going from loss-making to profitability, end quote. Perret will reportedly take a larger hand in the division as a replacement for Haddad is searched for, with Perret further highlighting the company's determination to invest in the gaming market, saying, quote, this is a long cycle investment business, and it's one where it's not for the faint of heart, end quote. Warner Bros. Other developer Rocksteady Games will potentially return to the famous Batman games now that the support for Suicide Squad has ended, though the future remains uncertain. While I still have it in my mind, can you take it and just slightly move it over? It was hard to read.
Oh, the thing, I was going to do it mid reading of the thing. I thought about it too late, so I'll fix it. I'll fix it. Wonder Woman, in trouble, not going well. Rocksteady, returning to Batman. Warner Brothers games continuing to flounder and just, like, flop around like a fish dying on a ship deck.
Yep.
This is unfortunate. This is we talked about this a little bit last week with our multiverses coverage of how, like, things are just not working out for Warner Brothers games at this point at all. You kind of wish that they had sold off this branch of their government, or of their government, of this branch of their company when they had the opportunity to, but instead they tried to make it work, and it's most definitely just making everything worse. Expect layoffs. Expect massive layoffs. Expect studio closure of a couple of studios, probably. This is going to be bad.
If they aren't sold off or
Exactly.
given independence, which happen
And
with
even in
Saber
that,
Interactive.
and even in that, expect those anyway, because these are the continue pains that the industry is going to have to go through in order to sort of find its center again.
I failed to inform it in the article, but Rocksteady did lay off people last year.
Yep.
I believe it was in the summer. I think it was shortly after Suicide Squad released.
It was after Suicide Squad released. I want to say it was a little later than summer, but I could be wrong.
I could be wrong too.
So yeah, not, turbulence is not unfounded at any part of this company, which is really unfortunate. This Wonder Woman game, I mean, on pitch, Monolith Studios, makers of Shadow of Mordor, making a Wonder Woman game. That sounds fun enough, similar enough combat systems, you would assume. I wouldn't expect I wouldn't expect the same formula that we got from the Shadow of Mordor games that we get in those games. So, like, I wasn't expecting an open world. I wasn't really expecting Nemesis system to be a part of it.
Neither was I.
Could have been wrong. But now it's like almost a guarantee of like, hey, you're getting a different experience with this than we've ever gotten before, which to me is cause for concern.
Especially because the Nemesis system, which is so cool, hasn't been instituted outside of the Shadow of Mordor games. And that's because of Warner Bros. Their decision on things has been very strange, from things like that to more important things like multiverses shutting down, despite the fact that it only came back relatively recently, and they had the weird decision to take it off of early access while it was in its heyday. Clearly it seems like this guy, Haddad, was not exactly making the right choices, and that led to uncertainty down the line. So Warner Bros. I mean, I looked at their slate of releases. The only thing they have majorly announced is the Wonder Woman game, and now that's years away. So you have nothing to keep you afloat in terms of live service games. You have no other big releases coming in that time frame. So what do? I remember there's some mobile games coming out and a remaster or an updated version of Hogwarts Legacy or something like that. Insignificant stuff overall.
Remastered, just
some updated version of the game. I can't remember entirely what it was. It's whatever it is. It's not going to do your company. It might do your company good, but not to get you out of the hole you've dug yourself into. But to counteract this, it does seem like they at least have the intention to stick around and not just say, well, we're going to fire all these people and close all these studios and make a big clusterfuck right now.
Right.
It's easy to say these things when you don't at that moment have plans to shut down a studio, but these companies, they love money. And if they're bleeding it by paying all of these people money for things that they're not getting any return on, Perret might be
going to stop paying those people.
Yeah, Perret might be confident in saying, hey, we'll stick it out, we'll do things, but he's only one guy, and decisions can go above him. So hopefully he has enough creative control to where he is preventing those layoffs from happening and these closures from happening, but I'm not very confident that that's going to be the case down the line. I've been thinking about what they could potentially do, and I don't know how, production works, but my only bet would be they could, get some studio, particularly a smaller one, an indie dev that's already making a game, and start funding them to get it out the gate faster to increase the quality of it, and then piggyback off of, where the game currently is now. But clearly original ideas are found lacking, and we're not going to be seeing any for quite some time. We'll probably see layoffs before we see any new announcement of
I guarantee
Warner Bros.
you
next
will.
games.
I guarantee. I don't even know if at this rate of Wonder Woman we ever see that game.
Oh, it's not sure. It's not assured.
Yeah.
$100 million when you're not even out yet. That's
It's a lot.
ridiculous. How many games could you have made with that amount of money? You could have made multiple games depending on how you do it.
This is a game that would have cost $300 million, whatever, to make, anyways.
Yeah, I'm talking like games in general. The whole scope of what you can do with $100 million.
Yeah,
it's pretty big.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown. Did they have $100 million
in
that money? No, and they made one of the best games in recent years. So
didn't even sell. No, but it is what it is. Yeah, this is an unfortunate one. The Wonder Woman is a game that I just constantly keep forgetting about that's happening because we're just not getting zero. We're getting zero news on it, and so yeah, something I'm always open to. Would love to see what this game is and where it's at and all that, but at the same time, take your time, make it good if you can. And hopefully, Warner Brothers does indeed get this one out. But
yeah, I mean, I like Wonder Woman a lot. The main DC people, she's probably my favorite. I like the Badass Warrior stuff.
Freak and uses a lot of that
Badass Warrior stuff, swords.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
The lasso's pretty cool too. It's Batarang. Ooh, it's a Batarang. So it's so stupid. In actual universe, what's that going to really do? A Batarang, huh? A whip though that can make you tell the truth. Tons of uses for that.
This after just immediately putting down Lara Croft and Nadine, you're killing it this week, dog.
Keep them guessing, as you said.
Moving on to topic number 2. Moving on. Oh, what the fuck is going on here?
My quick reactions.
Moving on to topic number 2, my first penny of the day. Rooster Teeth rises from the grave with the original founder at the helm. Following its closure 9 months ago, Rooster Teeth returns following its acquisition by one of the brand's founders, Bernie Burns, through his personal company, Box Canyon Productions. A press release reads, quote, Bernie Burns, founder of the online media outlet Rooster Teeth, has officially acquired the beloved entertainment brand. This milestone marks a new chapter for Rooster Teeth as it returns to the hands of its original creator as part of his company, Box Canyon Productions. Under Burns' leadership, the historic brand plans to renew its focus on innovation, community engagement, and the spirit of creativity that first defined its success. Rooster Teeth, previously owned by Warner Bros. Discovery, said goodbye in May of 2024, citing, quote, fundamental shifts in consumer behavior and monetization across platforms, advertising, and patronage. The entertainment company created web series, most famously Red vs. Blue, podcast playthroughs, and live-action productions. In Burns' podcast, Morning Somewhere, which he hosts alongside his wife, Ashley Jenkins, they implore fans to please don't go bother them, referring to previous Rooster Teeth members on whether or not they're a part of the revival. The FAQs page of the news site announced an AMA on their Patreon for this weekend to answer fan questions, and that a Monday episode will respond to submissions. Past Rooster Teeth Productions Red vs. Blue, Camp, and RT podcasts are currently advertised on the news site, along with the aforementioned Bernie Burns podcast, Morning Somewhere.
So definitely a smaller scale from what Rooster Teeth was before.
100%.
And that keeping it that way
they
is
were
probably
they were
the best,
upwards of 300 employees.
Yeah.
Maybe not at the time of their closure, but at their peak for sure. So yeah, we're definitely going to shrink this way down. The question is, what do you do?
You pick up some of your old stuff, I would assume. I mean, you're Rooster Teeth, so you at least have, hey, Red vs. Blue, we can do a reboot or a revival of some kind since it's under new production. Because at this point, the storyline that Red vs. Blue was following, I fell off at a certain point.
Yeah.
And it's, if I fell off, it's probably hard for new people to get onto it. And it didn't seem like it was in the, it wasn't in the zeitgeist. People weren't talking about it as they were back in the day. So clearly the relevance of it went far away somewhere else.
Yeah.
Camp, I actually did watch a lot of that.
Camp's not bad.
It's good, yeah.
Yeah.
But, are you going to keep that?
I don't know.
Yeah, they're advertising it, but that could be just because, that's what we did. That's what we can at least get new people on and see generally what we're going to do. Because I didn't mention before, he was talking about doing his Bernie Burns redoing his feature film or a film that he had made before. Yeah, and, who knows if that'll actually come about.
Right.
Especially with what the scale is going to be. Because that AMA, I was hoping we'd be able to get some stuff by the time we covered this, but still lock and key, or if, maybe it'll come later today. Maybe it's happening and being unveiled what their exact plans are right now. But as this stands from the recording, you obviously would want to do new stuff. But
yeah,
as long as you tone it down and that's the baseline you're working for, I think Rooster Teeth has a bright future ahead of them.
I certainly hope so. A lot of this matters of you want returning castmates to come back, especially a lot of fan favorites to come back. The problem is that this was 9 months ago. A lot of them have probably moved on, closed that book, that chapter of their lives, and found something new to do.
And to your point, I listened to the podcast where they're discussing this quickly, and that's what they mentioned. How a lot of these people who they've even had on their Morning Somewhere podcast talk about how getting started on their own has been a challenge. So some people might not want to put in all that effort and then say, well, I'm just going to go back to the old thing I was doing when they got a new thing off the ground relatively.
Of course. And Rooster Teeth, especially in its later years, but in a lot of just the behind the scenes that had happened throughout all of its production life cycle, is no stranger to some online controversy and failures to support their staff where needed to, right? So that would be my big hope, is if we're doing this again, let's do it right. Let's do a better job cultivating our fan base to be a more positive environment for newcomers and for people of color and people of LGBT, et cetera, and different cultures to be incorporated in this. And I mean, as far as like what you create and what you make, I could see, how a return to Red versus Blue would be a smart choice. I don't know what you would do in that universe. A lot of those stories have been told. I think there's a pretty clear line in the sand that you can draw of when Rooster Teeth started to kind of go downhill a little bit, and it's when some of those original founders, including Bernie Burns himself, left the company. And you can see like a clear, like, all right, this doesn't have the same spark that it used to after that. Certainly some of those, many of those employees and faces that the audience knows had been around from the early days on and, still kind of carried that flag forward. So it's just a matter of like, what are we doing after that? I'm very curious to see what this turns into. I imagine you're going to see a return of the classic Rooster Teeth podcast. I don't know if you see things like Achievement Hunter come back. I don't know if you see things like the Funhouse stuff come back. I doubt you'll see Funhouse come back. No. And there's just a lot of other like off brands and spin-off shows and things that I just don't know. I don't think you see Ruby. I don't think you see a lot of their other animated stuff, which a lot of it was good. Some of it not so much. But yeah, I do see. I see a dramatic drop in let's say like production quality or just production ambition in that. I think it would be smart to return to Machinima in some way. I don't know if it's with Halo. I don't know if it's with Red versus Blue. Maybe you create something new with that. But I think sort of recreating your roots thematically, evoking some of those feelings that you had, some of that grassroots feelings that you had in those early Red versus Blue days, I think would be a smart choice. And so, yeah, it's just a matter of how much tact they go forward with this and if the audience responds to it. I think there's a section of the audience that always will. I don't see Rooster Teeth ever climbing to the heights that they had before. And I definitely don't see them ever selling their rights off ever again.
And I think that would be a mistake if they got to their general same level of height, because I think that's what caused the bigger fall, when they started not being able to meet those expectations.
Right.
Which it seems to me like you watch Rooster Teeth stuff way more than I did and consistently than I did.
I was a fan for a very long time.
Yes. Yeah, where I like the personalities behind it, but I didn't really watch the content or find much enjoyment out of it personally. It was still good stuff. Like especially like Camp and Red versus Blue, most notably. But when they started reaching those bigger heights of doing bigger and greater things, obviously you said that they started dropping off when some of the original people left. Was that tied in to the expansion of what Rooster Teeth is, that it lost the magic that made you watch it in the first place?
Yeah, I think when they sold, I forget what parent company they sold to at first. It wasn't Warner Brothers. They've been passed around a couple of times. Yes. But I think as soon as they did that, I think that sort of marks the point of where they got a little too big for their britches.
Businessy.
When you sell off your independence, it immediately becomes a problem. I think that's why you see companies like Kinda Funny continue to survive and thrive. On a much smaller scale, but they placate to their base. They produce shows of quality to the level of quality that they want to, and they continue a slow, steady climb. They'll probably never reach the heights of what Rooster Teeth reached, but look where that got them. Right? Yeah. There's just certain ceilings that once you break through, the risks become, so much higher. Look at the video game industry as a whole. You can draw a clear delineation between that. When someone else has that power over you and you don't produce the profits that they're looking for whatever reason, or maybe they just don't like you, you're going to get closed. You're going to get layoffs. You're going to get all these things. Rooster Teeth was a victim of multiple rounds of layoffs that they may not have had if they stayed independent. Now, that also means that they wouldn't have had animated shows starring Michael B. Jordan or Elijah Wood and so on and so forth. But, you would have had a foundation of people who come to enjoy content consistently. You would not have ever grown to 300 plus employees. You would not have ever grown to be able to put on conventions to the level and to the scale that they had for as long as they had. And I also think the pandemic very much damaged that company, and they never really recovered from it financially. And so Warner Brothers said, we've had enough.
Yeah, which is that was the other thing I was going to bring up. It was Warner Bros. Who we just covered. They're not exactly, they don't have it all together.
Yeah.
They haven't had it together for a couple of years now.
Yeah.
So that also could have attributed
this. This is the thing. The pandemic damaged the creative space irreparably.
Yeah.
Like, it will take forever for creatives to find consistent and stable work. Just no matter what medium you're in, creatives are really suffering right now.
Yeah, they are. Now, maybe these guys, for Rooster Teeth, they don't have 8 locations. Oh, that was in 2018. Never mind. They probably reduced by that point.
Yeah, again, it just depends. And what counts as a location? Kind of Funny signed a merchandising deal with them. So Kind of Funny used the Rooster Teeth store to sell their merch and stuff. Mm-hmm. Obviously, when they went away, that didn't damage Kind of Funny. It just means they had to handle that on their own now, and they adjusted and pivoted and did that, and I think reached out to a different brand and so on and so forth. So what is 8 locations? Who knows? But the important part here is I'm hoping that they get some key personalities back in order to sort of ensure quality, or not ensure quality. That's a bad way to put it. Ensure a certain level of familiar to where old fans can still have touchstones and still relate to this content. And I hope that they're able to capture a new audience and sort of reinvent what Rooster Teeth is. Again, my main hope of this is that they cultivate a more positive fan base, because the Rooster Teeth fan base was very, very toxic, especially to people of color and women.
I heard about the woman part. There was some. It's been so long, but I can't. I remember there was some criticism of women.
Well, for the most part, they every black woman that they platformed got torn to shreds. Online, and it was really, really bad. And most of the women just in general got torn to shreds, but the black women got it the worst.
Even more.
A lot of the Latino employees that they had and personalities that they had also faced a lot of troubles. There was just a lot of Gamergate gamers, for lack of a better term. Just kind of just tore personalities apart, and the ones that stuck around were went through hell to kind of establish themselves in that. And so I hope that they do a better job of cultivating that fan base. And I also hope they do a better job of managing their employees, because there was several examples of certain personalities grooming young people and minors and so forth, and having sexual affairs and so forth. That was really, really not good. So
who's the fucking guy? It was one of the Ryan something?
Ryan Haywood and Ryan Haywood of Achievement Hunter and Adam Kovic of Funhouse. I think there was a couple of other examples that I'm not familiar of, but that was the one that I think really broke the straw that broke the camel's back for a lot of the fandom, and the ones who stuck around after that were not the most positive people.
Yeah.
Not that there was ever a lot of positivity going around anyway. It's just a company that I think started with the best intentions, really struck gold in a lot of really key areas, but overall sort of lost their way and fell victim to predators.
For lack of a better word.
Predators of the cultural sense and society sense, and also of the business sense.
Yeah,
they were taken advantage of by a bunch of these elitist CEO types, and we lost a lot of really cool stuff in it. It sucks, but you hope for the brightest future, but
it's hard.
This is up to Bernie Burns kind of really taking ownership of the mistakes of the past and moving forward and eliciting change to make this work. I hope they do, because I would love to see just this news alone started circulating old Rooster Teeth content into my algorithms again. And so I've watched a couple of old videos of upwards of 10 years ago, and getting huge nostalgia kicks. And so I kind of hope that some of this kind of comes back, some of that feeling of a bunch of friends hanging out, making dumb, stupid content, or, high quality internet web series, which that's something that has almost entirely disappeared in the streaming era. So I kind of hope that we sort of see a return to that because, the heydays of Red versus Blue, which were long, it was a long time where Red versus Blue was the most dominant web series on the internet.
It was the gold standard for, even now it's almost the gold standard.
I would argue there's a good amount, probably from they made, 20 seasons of Red versus Blue. Season, probably 6 or 7, all the way to season 13, were really high quality.
I remember that, yeah. That was when I was most attached to the story of what was going on. And
and there was ups and downs after that, but it did eventually get to a point where it was all right, this is not of the same quality anymore. So, if they're able to kind of recapture some of that magic with some of these original creators and so forth, I hope it works. I truly do hope it works, and I'm hoping for the best for everyone who wants to be involved. And I'm hoping that the audience doesn't cause any assholes and cause any problems for those who are involved or who choose to step away. I hope everybody gets happy and makes money and is successful off of this. I hope.
That'd be ideal.
I truly believe this is all on the shoulders of Bernie Burns on if this succeeds or not, and especially if they're able to cultivate a more positive culture within their community. We'll see. Connor, moving on to topic number 3 of the day, your second penny. Go ahead and take it away, my friend.
Roblox involved in active investigation by the SEC. A Freedom of Information Act request submitted by Bloomberg has found online video game service Roblox Corp. is part of an unknown investigation by the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commissions, the SEC. Quote, we have confirmed with Division of Enforcement staff that there are responsive emails between enforcement staff referencing Roblox, and that these emails are part of an active and ongoing investigation, end quote, the commission said in a letter last Friday. Roblox has been accused of inflating metrics and being a hotbed for pedophiles due to the high degree of minors who frequent the site. A 2023 annual report from Roblox Corp showed that 58% of Roblox's users are aged 16 and below, while 41% of Roblox's player base are in the 17 and up age range. I believe more. Yeah, Roblox recently updated protections on the site by allowing parents to limit children under 13 from engaging in voice chat without permission, as well as children under 9 from freely playing content that contains moderate violence or crude humor. The company has yet to respond to inquiries regarding the investigation. So this is a very ground level news story because not the SEC is not willing to say anything, obviously because it would impede with their investigation, and Roblox doesn't want bad press, so clearly not. The interesting thing here is it doesn't specify that they're the only people under investigation, or it's focused on them, just that they're a part of it. Now, that part could be still them being the focal point of whatever case they're building against them, or they could be a consistent problem that's appeared in the gaming industry, or maybe across multiple industries. Really, we don't know. It's I imagine this will develop fairly recently. Stocks have already dropped, so clearly shareholders are probably not the happiest right now. And it's basically just a story of, keep an eye out for what's going to happen next with Roblox, because it's a game that it is obviously fun for kids because they can just play it without needing to buy a big new console or asking their parents to buy a new game. They can just, as long as they have some kind of device they can play it on, which you can do it on your phone nowadays, you just log on and fuck around.
Also, lots of creator tools to, there are so many, sub games within the game of Roblox. It really does sort of appeal to a lot of really, really young gamers. This is the thing this is after my time. I've always been told Roblox is a big thing, but I was too old by the time Roblox came around, or not when it came around, but really by the time it developed into what it is today.
When it looks like a Call of Duty game?
Huh?
Oh, there's a Roblox game. It looks like Call of Duty. It's obviously based off of it, but it looks like
in terms of all the sub games. There's a wide diversity of games. None of them look the same. There's like a Sims game and a dance game and 100 things.
Squid Game.
Yeah, exactly. Jesus. Yeah, it attracts a very, very large percentage of very young players. Even, I would say, the oldest players on the platform probably skew still sub 25, probably. And so that can be very, very concerning whenever there's young people about and they're allowed to sort of play freely, especially on the internet, and communicate with who knows who. There's a lot of predators out there. You got to be careful. And so it does seem like Roblox is trying to take some steps to make it a little bit more secure, a little bit more safe for these people to go around.
As they should.
As they should. Keep going. Keep making that stronger. And so this is a tricky tightrope to walk. I hope that the SEC doesn't find anything too crazy damaging.
That's what I'm worried about.
Yeah, that's where it starts getting, like, maybe some negligence or inflating numbers or allowing predatory actions to take place on their platform knowingly.
Which is my worry.
Yeah.
I don't think that's very likely because it doesn't make sense they would want to do that. It's kind of counteractive to their model because the moment someone finds out they're doing that, they're fucked.
Well,
they might be fucked.
Unless somebody, we saw Twitch protect DJ Dr. Disrespect this last year.
That is true.
Yeah. And it really comes down to if somebody at Roblox is a predator and it's somebody who happens to make them money.
Well, then the issue with Roblox comparison to Dr. Disrespect is that's a singular individual on a platform, whereas this it's baked in the way the game is structured that you can interact with children fairly easily.
Yeah.
The 13 requirement's nice. They probably should raise it just because it's like, okay, what's stopping them from doing it to a 15-year-old or a 14-year-old?
But also, when has an age requirement ever stopped anybody?
That's true. But that's
we play Marvel Rivals. That is a T for teen game, and I've seen children on that.
Yeah,
in game, I've seen someone who I'm not talking to them, I'm not communicating with them, so maybe I don't really fully know. But just by the way they play, you can kind of tell if somebody's younger.
Yeah, definitely.
Where they just start doing things where they clearly just want to look cool or play as their favorite Marvel character or whatever. And so I've had plenty of experience where I go, this is a kid. I'm not going to take this game too seriously because there's a kid on my team or on their team, So I'm not going to take this too seriously. But even being able to identify that just based off of player actions alone, if I was somebody who was not me,
predator,
that could be a problem, right?
And a lot of this has to do with parents because it's giving these things control to the parents of know what your kid is playing, know what's on their app. I know it's a far cry from
if they're talking to somebody, know who they're talking to.
Yes, exactly. That kind of stuff's difficult because when we were kids, we didn't have to deal with the same level that children nowadays do, and so it might
same level of freedoms.
Same level of freedoms, yes.
Yeah.
So it seems like it might be a extensive breach of privacy in certain ways, not this one, but in other ways in which kids might be limited in what games they can play.
I also think at our age, there was probably a lot of really undocumented abuse that happened because the internet was kind of the Wild West.
Which is why my point is, when you're dealing with children and potentially having them be scarred physically or psychologically, play it safe. They're kids. Kids are the age group where you can kind of make them do things, and you're fully in your legal right to do so.
Yeah.
So take advantage.
And it's 100% on onus of companies like Roblox to put in as much security as they can so that this doesn't happen. I don't care if you have to start restricting rights of people inside your video game, you're
allowed to do that.
It's your software. You're allowed to do it. You own it. It's your created world. You are allowed to do that. It's on you to protect your player base.
And if that means that pedophiles are going to leave the site, well, win-win.
So fucking be it.
Wins it.
Yeah. Moving on, Connor, to our final topic of the day. We're out of news. This is a weak news. This is a weak news week. There's just not a lot going on. We kind of covered the big topics of today. We could have
PSN went down.
PSN went down. Whoop the fucking do. I did fall victim to some fake news on that, where I don't know if you saw it, but I put in an image of a tweet from PlayStation that said it was down due to hackers, but the hackers didn't steal anybody's personal information.
Yes, I see.
They instead put Concord on everybody's system,
which
that's a funny lie. But I totally fell victim to it. I don't know how I did. I think it was one of the Culture Cave things posted or whatever, so I assumed it was real.
Probably from fears from the past. I think it was 2011 when there was that big PSN
outage, where they were down for 3 months.
Yeah, and they were hacked in that case, weren't they?
It was real bad. It was real bad.
Yeah, you don't want to recreate that.
No, you don't. You don't. So, and all right, PSN went down for 24 hours. I didn't even notice. I was busy, with my life.
Yeah.
So, it could have not happened or happened, and I wouldn't have known either way. You know what I'm saying?
Monster Hunter Wild beta users got the beta extended, so
an extra day. They got an extra day, and PS Plus owners get an extra week.
5 days.
Was it 5 days?
Yeah, it's
I thought it was a full week. Oh, okay,
yeah,
cool.
full work week, but
I mean,
not the same thing.
24 hours.
Yeah,
that's pretty good. It's a pretty good trade off.
Yeah,
and also, what is the PlayStation supposed to do in this scenario? It's not like it. Let's be honest. People on the internet like to joke that it happens all the time. It doesn't happen that often.
no, it doesn't.
They
run a pretty tight ship as far as their online services.
Yeah,
go.
and it functions and works well for the most part. There are outages, and they do probably happen more than the other guys or the other big guys in the field, right?
Yeah.
But okay,
no big deal.
yeah.
But
Connor, because of the lack of news this week, real news, we're in that waiting period. We're waiting for some more presentations, some more directs, all these types of things. We're assuming there's a state of PlayStation state of play coming this week. My theory is on Thursday, because we got that Metal Gear Solid Delta Snake Eater release date leak from PlayStation on Thursday last week. I think they got the weeks wrong. All that to say, we decided to have a little bit more of an evergreen topic, and I wanted to talk to you. But what are the golden ages of games?
The 1980s.
No.
Rule out that one.
Right. So here, I don't think there's hard lines or sort of dates that you can sort of draw. You can kind of paint some general time frames or whatever. I don't think any time frame really lasts longer than 5 years. Is when you start entering and exiting some of those things. And it does get a little murky just based off of the years in which the art was created and so forth.
What is an age in the video game industry? I don't
Literally,
know.
yeah, how, but video games have been around for, about 50 years now, give or take. And so I forget if we've passed, I don't know. Doesn't matter. There's not a hard date, right?
The first video game was made in the 1950s, so technically it's been going on for longer.
We're still in the infancy, arguably, of video games. I think we're well past that. I think when people like to compare where the video game industry is at to the movie industry or the music industry and things like that, I think it's a false comparison, because clearly the video game industry is evolving at a faster pace than those things evolved, because video games are standing on the shoulders of giants in terms of industrializing it and creating profit in it and making it a profitable thing in a capitalistic society. Jesus, I'm getting off the rails.
It's one of the reasons why this recent era of games hasn't really had the big leaps that they used to in the past.
Yep.
There's conversations being had of what exactly the next console is going to be, how far away it's going to be, what are the changes, and it's shaping up to be the same exact thing. So now that that's petering off, we can look back at the time when it was all rising up.
Yeah.
And that's when that's the time period where you get into deciding what the golden age of games is.
Yeah.
Especially because when would this age of this current year be involved in? 2020 to 2025? I don't know.
I don't know. I would say right now we are currently not in a golden age.
Layoffs alone.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. But just in terms of the art that's coming out and the games that are coming out, certainly good.
Elden Ring, Baldur's Gate 3, God of War Ragnarok.
Not a bad era to be in.
Yeah.
We're really not in a bad era right now, as much as the internet would like to tell you that we are. But we're not. We're in a pretty good era right now. I think we've seen better. Yeah. I think we've recently seen better, right? Mm-hmm. I think we just exited, for example, a golden era of games, probably in that I'm going to say 2015 to 2020 was probably a golden era of games. You can kind of stretch that a couple of years either direction if you want. I think definitively 2020 ended a golden era of games. I mean, you got Last of Us Part 2, Ghost of Tsushima, Final Fantasy VII Remake. There's some other bangers that happened that year. And I think we entered another year another era post-pandemic, or in the pandemic, we entered another era, right? So I would count things like, as you said, Elden Ring, Baldur's Gate 3 in a part of a different era.
Yeah, of course. So process of elimination, not the current one we're living in.
I don't
that
think so.
one's still up for that's definitely in the debate.
I think we're also exiting whatever era we're in right now, and we're about to enter a new one.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I guess the other big question becomes 2010/2011 to 2015, 2014. No, it'd be 2010 to 2014, because it's kind of hard. Again, this is the problem of finding out era.
Allow some stretching in either direction, right? I would say 2 to 3 years stretch in either direction kind of works. That's why I said 15, but then you lose The Last of Us.
Yeah.
And you go, well, The Last of Us was kind of a big deal, so you kind of want that, and it definitely kickstarted the golden age that I was just talking about. But was it part of that golden age? I would argue no. It was part of it was the end of the one before it, right?
Yep.
You know, and so like, and I mean, in any era, you're gonna find classic, revolutionary, incredible titles, right? The Last of Us, GTA 5, BioShock. Even though I personally don't like BioShock, or I shouldn't say don't care for BioShock. You know, you're always going to find things like that. But yeah, to your point of the early 2010s was okay.
Early 2010s being 2010, the year 2010.
Yeah, I guess.
Is that the culmination of God of War?
2004 type thing. You know, or 2014 rather.
Okay.
You know, it was
2014. Oh, you're talking about that area.
yeah, somewhere. Yeah,
Okay,
the early teens, early teens.
Yeah, that's definitely not the golden age because there's
I
a
don't
lot
think
of
so either.
there's a lot of
just okay.
okay games. Yeah,
There's a lot of okay.
The pendulum in terms of like the expansion of creativity in the field didn't really move. You had
Yeah.
Last of Us and Skyrim, but other than that,
Skyrim's pretty great. Again,
It's great,
you're
yeah.
gonna find incredible titles in every era. Like that's just
Yeah.
how this art works, right?
uh-huh.
But
2015, I should say again,
Go ahead.
because you mentioned 2020 for your period that you're initially arguing for, at least putting forward. You're also getting 2015, The Witcher 3, Bloodborne.
that's where I think that era starts.
Yeah. So like including that, the focus was on the end, but
yeah.
a lot
I
of
mean,
good
yeah.
stuff.
Witcher 3, Bloodborne, Uncharted 4,
Fire Emblem Three Houses in that period.
exactly.
Sekiro.
I don't care for it, but Breath of the Wild, Sekiro. Yeah, and then all the 2020 games, your specific games that I mentioned as well. Resident Evil 2 remake as well. Like, wow. You know, that run that PlayStation went on with, you know, what Last of Us started and then ended with like sort of The Last of Us Part 2, God of War 2018, Spider-Man 2018, Red Dead Redemption 2. You know, that just kind of goes on and on and on in that direction.
Yeah.
You know, that really was something. Horizon Zero Dawn, you know, not our favorite video game, but certainly a very high quality game, new IP that really, really kind of shifted PlayStation or helped with the shift PlayStation was making in that era, right? Very, very high quality era in there. But again, yeah, that 2010 to 2014 was good, not great. I would argue even the era we're in now was better than that era.
Yeah.
Not by much, though.
Baldur's Gate 3 and Elden Ring and God of War Ragnarok.
I think those are about
elevate those.
equivalent to Last of Us, Skyrim, whatever else you want to throw in that, the Mass Effect trilogy.
Yeah.
You know, it's
Plus
kind
the
of,
other good games that came out during that time.
Yeah, you know, like I think that's about equivalent. You know, I just kind of prefer where we are now than where we were then. And then when you start getting to that pre-2010, I don't know where you start cutting off lines there. That gets a little murky. Again, I think these 5-year increments are still pretty solid, you know, with some stretchability. 2009 to 2005, working backwards, of course, so 5 to 9, I think is a bad era.
See, I cannot believe. Well, no, it's not a bad era, but it's not like better than the one you were just describing. But it might be because you have the orange box, which you know that was a pretty big thing at the time.
Great game.
The creation
Portal 2
of
is phenomenal.
the emergence of like, okay, now we're playing online. Now online gaming is
sure.
being cemented, and that's arguably the biggest part of the games industry, even to this day.
Yeah.
Most people will go back and keep playing.
Halo,
and spend money on those
Halo,
things.
Call of Duty, you know, took
Battlefield
a
even at the time.
meteoric rise during this era, right?
Also, the emergence of things like Mass Effect, which has done something that no game at that point had ever done. Of you're making me play what's going to be a trilogy. In the case of the era we're talking about, the first and second game, and everything matters and goes and like that's what you're doing.
Yeah.
Who does that? No one did really.
Right. And you'll never see it again.
Yeah.
I mean, arguably with the Final Fantasy VII Remake trilogy, but games take so fucking long now that trilogy is going to last 2 or 3 different eras, depending on how you count it.
Yeah, you know, okay, so the other issue is not, I think the bigger issue actually isn't the scope of when an era is and defining the games they're in. It's defining what makes the golden age. Because
I agree.
The one you described, 2015 to 20, I think that's definitively, if we're arguing, you know, what was the best playing games that are going to hold up the best years even down the line, I think that's a really good era because, you know, the 2000 games, you can find even great, amazing games kind of show their age a bit. Whereas those ones in the 2015s to 20s, I feel like are always going to be playable, regardless of what you're at. And that goes into the whole idea of games petering out in terms of the things they're capable of.
Yeah.
So
this is kind of my point for 05 to 09 is I don't know how well those games are going to age because they were hyper linear. This is where you start seeing the rise of technical fidelity that I personally think has been the downfall of the artistic expression of this medium. Not the downfall, but a limiter of artistic expression in this medium is the obsession with technological advancements, of the obsession of how real can we make things.
That's kind of the thing. That actually adds to the. I'm sorry to cut you off. Finish your point.
And then on top of that, like, gameplay like took a back seat in this era, and it was very much focused on. I mean, you saw how meteoric rise in first-person shooters in this era. Like, it was ridiculous, and if you couldn't shoot a gun properly, like it was considered like a lesser than product. I mean, you brought up Mass Effect. Mass Effect 1 is my personal favorite of the franchise, right? But there was player, I'm not going to say backlash. There was player critique of that first Mass Effect because it didn't play like an action game. Because that's what the audience demanded in that time, right?
Yes.
They demanded a game that played like Call of Duty. They demanded a game that played like Halo, right? And so Mass Effect doesn't hold up in that way. It holds up in ways that all you're talking about with great ambition, narrative consequences, you're going to make choices, agency, all these things, right? Mm-hmm. And I still think system for system basis, Mass Effect is a phenomenal game. But it's just how the game felt to play fell short, right? In the ways that people cared about. Because they wanted Modern Warfare. They wanted Halo 3. They wanted a bunch of games like that.
Yes.
And I just don't think... I just think that era of games is also ugly as shit. This is because it's again so focused on hyperrealism, so many browns, so many grays, just not a lot of artistic expression at all during this era. Of course, you can find examples where that's not the case, but generally, like, this is a muddy era to me. Like, this is just an era of like, ugh. Like, I don't like looking at these games. I don't like playing these games, and mechanically, a lot of these games didn't do anything very interesting to where they stand the test of time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was going to make the argument of, because I, for some reason, thought Walking Dead came out in 2009. And I was also thinking about Alan Wake, in terms that was a year where they were experimenting with those realistic aspects, which would be more of a negative effect down the line. But at the time, it seemed like a period more of experimenting with what kind of games you can play, rather than, not including the online games, because clearly that dominated it. But that's when it came out into fruition. We can build entire games only around online play that's not an MMO, which was the market up until that point.
Sure.
Ultimately, though, I think this era will lose out compared to 2000 to 2005.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So even if we could argue, hey, this game came out and this came out and this did good and whatnot, it's going to pale in comparison to the era we talked about previously, what we're about to talk about, and further what we're about to talk about with the 90s.
I just think there is a clear step down in 05 to 09 from the rest of them. You know,
yes,
like I just think it's trailing behind in all of them in ways that you don't see until the late 70s, early 80s, right? Like, where it's just kind of like, all right, well, these are just like ideas,
right?
You know, of course, I would say these games are better than those games, but like, you know, I think it's again standing on the shoulders of giants, but not taking advantage. Here's my thing about it. I've been talking a lot on a lot of our shows of what games take advantage of the medium. 2005 to 2009 did not take advantage of the medium. For the most part, generally. Exceptions, of course. Exceptions with everything I'm going to say here, right? That era right before it fully takes advantage of the medium in my sense. I don't think we quite hit golden era, but I do think that 99, 2000, wherever you want to make that cutoff, to that 2004, 2005 era, that weird PS2, Xbox One, or original Xbox rather, era, like that, and Nintendo GameCube was really starting to take advantage of what can we do with gameplay, right? What makes this medium different than every other medium? There was an element of we're chasing movies, we're trying to make things more cinematic. Ratchet and Clank was actively shooting to look like a Disney Pixar movie, you know? But I think mechanically we still had a lot of really great examples of games that were willing to experiment, that were willing to give you just a sandbox of tools and see what the player did with it, right? I mean, look at the two Metal Gear Solid games in this era. Are you fucking kidding me? Mm-hmm. Like, goddamn, Kojima was on a hot streak.
Okami, Half-Life 2. I know Okami's not a small pick, but it's visually amazing and stands up to the test of time.
And we're not afraid to play around with art style, to your point. Yeah,
yes,
Shadow
exactly.
Colossus. We're not afraid to be art here.
And I kind of can argue against what we were just saying with 2006 to 10 or whatever we decided. Where it was the year, was the advent of online games to the point where it is now. 2000 to 2005 had World of Warcraft, the game that arguably started the idea for Call of Duty people to say, hey, we can make money off of shifting from these single-player games, which is the standard, to online games.
You've also got Halo 2, 2002.
Yes.
Right?
The entire Halo franchise came out during this period.
Oh, you're right.
Halo 1, 2, that's I'm
3
the
is
entire
2007.
1, 2. Yes.
So, yeah.
We
Even though I
also
love
ignore
3.
that, but-
I love 3. That's my favorite of the franchise. 3 is the best game. We should never move past 3.
No, it's never going online games, almost all of them, will never reach the heights that were Halo 3. In terms of quality, in terms of how everybody was obsessed with it. Like, I don't think...
And the content that you had in that game is so... But again, exceptions to every rule. Even though it landed in an era that I don't particularly like, it found its foundations in an era that I do like. You know what I'm saying? So, like, yeah, what Halo... That build of Halo 1, Halo 2 into Halo 3, clear line of quality increasing there. I think there are some 3 detractors in comparison to 2 directly, but I would say 3 is just pound for pound a better game than 2. And, you know, what 2's influence over that online multiplayer shooting, sort of finding, you know, the stepping stones of that, the foundational stepping stones of figuring out what works, what doesn't work, how to do it better. Halo 2 is an example of, oh, hey, we kind of figured it out. And again, you brought it up and I was going to as well. World of Warcraft changed the world.
Yeah.
You know, like, it really, like, created that, it put video games into that era of, like, oh, this is a social thing. And it you know, the South Park meme of the fat nerd guy in the chair or whatever, you know, came from World of Warcraft.
Exactly,
and, you know, all these pop culture ideas of what video games are and what a gamer is past the age of 13 is because of World of Warcraft.
Being surrounded by adults who don't really know much about video games, World of Warcraft was their standard for a lot of things.
Yeah.
They even knew about it, you know?
Damn, is this a golden age?
It might be. That's why I'm thinking of it, because I think it's beating out the one as much as we love it, the 2015s to 2020s. There's so many other high-quality games that hold up to this day. You mentioned Metal Gear Solid 3 and 2.
Yeah.
There's Half-Life 2. There's Shadow of the Colossus. Less so, but clearly that's only our opinions, because this gets to the point of we have our game club where we rank games based off what we think is the best one. And there's that conversation we've had, okay, what matters more when we're making this list? The quality of the game in and of itself or the history the game has?
Impact, legacy versus playability today.
Clearly we've kind of gone more on the playability route, but that
we still show respect.
We still do, and this is where I think it deserves that even more, because it's more, when we're talking about the golden age and why it's going to have the best case for it with this type of argument.
Oh my god,
with
Resident
the games
Evil
of
4
90s.
is in this era. God, Resident Evil 4
Resident Evil 4 is in this era. Final Fantasy
X
X in this era when they first did voice acting, and you know that was monumental to a lot of people. I'm looking at games to get a better idea. Twilight Princess, you just missed it. Don't worry, Twilight Princess. The God of War got its start there though, as well. Grand Theft Auto Vice City, Grand Theft Auto 3, I believe as well.
Devil May Cry.
Devil May Cry is
establishing what a character action game is fucking insane.
There's so many good ones. I mean, but at the same time, Silent Hill 2,
but there's a lot of elements of these games that don't hold up either.
That's true, but I think that is counterbalanced by its importance, which arguably it's more important than the games in the 15-10 range, 15 to 20 range. And that combined with still having playable games here, because a lot of the ones I mentioned before, Half-Life 2, you can pick that up. And I picked that up recently. It plays like a game that would be made today. I would never question it whatsoever.
I don't know about that.
Because it plays around with a unique style, and it's got its nice system of the physics mechanics that just make the game play fun and play well. And
I think it plays
well.
about as well as those 2 Metal Gear games play, which I would argue are still pretty damn good, but definitely aged.
Sure, but that's the thing. I think that's where Half-Life is able to retain its age. It's able to be a little bit more playable for most audiences. But it's still like it's almost like you're arguing. Personally, what do you think games were better in 2015 to 2020, or are they better in this time frame? Which is why I kind of start erring on the side of, arguably I would say 2015 to 2020, because those are when some of my favorite games came out. But that combined with how important it was, and you not obviously getting what would come later, I think is where history really starts, pulling its weight in deciding what is the golden era of gaming.
Yeah, I also like just comparing the 2 eras here.
Metroid Prime.
Oh fuck, dude!
Perfect Dark.
Oh god, this era is bananas.
That's crazy.
I was totally underrating this because to start when I pitched this idea in the conversation, I was thinking the mid to late 90s and the mid to late teens. Is where I was going. And wow, and I was like, oh yeah, and those early 2000s are great too. But wow, those are really, really great years. I just think the only counter to it specifically is I don't think the base is ready for. There are examples of it, of course, but I don't think the base is ready for more mature stories, more mature thematic elements and gameplay elements and so forth, in which the audience was primed and ready for by those mid to late teens and into the 20s, right? I've always talked about there is to me a clear pre and post Last of Us world. Where suddenly we can start telling stories where the player does not inhabit the shoes of the good guy. He inhabits the shoes of maybe the bad guy, you know?
Okay, when you say that, like, God of War is standing right behind you.
Yeah, but God of War never told the player that you're bad. The God of War wanted you to believe that Kratos was wronged. Kratos was a hero and the hero of the story. You look back on the actions today and you go, how? But that was the perspective back then. It was also so edgy, you know. It's just so much edge and teen angst in the 2000s.
But it doesn't take away from the fact, even if someone was incapable of doing it, or the general audience was, he was a bad guy. I mean, there's that scene I know from 3 where he has that slave in Poseidon's temple he's carrying around, and he uses her to basically kills her to open the gate. That kind of stuff. He's like, okay, maybe he is a bad person.
In today's modern lens, yes, but back then, I think the perspective was, yeah, we're gonna do that.
But even then, if that's what you're arguing in terms of player perception of it, a lot of people still see Joel as, you know, if not being in the right, being in a position where he's more justifiable than someone like Kratos is. And part of that is because of Last of Us' kind of Naughty Dog's inability to kind of stick to their guns. Because I know in the original game, they were like, oh, this whole thing with Ellie, you know, it's not a surefire cure to the disease. There's been failures in the past. And just for the sake of keeping up, like, no, Joel did a bad thing. They removed it, which is kind of lamer.
I just think the what?
Like, if you remove this facet of, hey, it's not just objectively he's doing the wrong thing, as it would later be made into.
He is objectively doing the wrong thing.
Well, it's objectively in the sense of, this would have led to the cure, and you rejected that in favor of your daughter and your replacement daughter. But if you include that other element of it, it's like, well, you know, he's not exactly... He's just trusting that they're going to be able to do something at her cost of her life, and maybe it won't result in anything.
I'm losing your point here.
Which is to say that, like, God of War, it never changed who Kratos was. From beginning to A, even if you didn't understand whether he was actually a villain, he was a villain. You know, I don't think player perception. You know, he was an anti-hero, but he's bad.
But I think the perspective of the art from the creators and how it was received to the public were the same, in that it was like a oh yeah, we're gonna do this we're gonna do this badass thing because we're badass and we don't respect women and this, that, and the third. I think that was always the perspective on both sides of creator and observer of player on that, right? Whereas in Last of Us, it was the creator going, all right, here is a complex character with layers. He does a thing that is morally gray, pretty much objectively wrong. How do you feel about it? And the player response was, well, let's have a conversation about it. Because I get it, bad thing to do, but I also get it. That's his daughter, right? I would probably do the same in that scenario because I'm human. We're able to have a little bit of a deeper conversation because of that. I don't think that was capable in the early 2000s like we're talking about, and I think specifically it wasn't capable because Metal Gear Solid 2 exists, and the fan backlash from when Kojima was trying to have a multi-layered conversations and nobody was picking up what he was putting down, caused him to then create the greatest video game of all time. But
caveat to that is that it really is core that they replaced a character that everyone had gotten to love with one who's not that lovable, and pretending like we're going to play Solid Snake again, and then pulling the rug from under that. So I wouldn't say that's entirely because people were looking at the narrative solely from the narrative perspective. They already had their minds soiled basically within 2 hours of the game starting up.
But you also didn't know that Raiden was the rest of the game. You assumed, assumed, this would last 30 minutes and then you go back to Snake.
True, fair.
And then you're fighting vampires in a fucking weird watery hole, and you're like, when am I going back to? I'm not going back to Snake.
You are not.
No.
I understand your point, though. There is clear, in terms of storytelling, how are we going to handle this stuff?
I think both the creators and the audience matured to a level to where we are able to have deeper conversations about all of these things that just wasn't there in the early 2000s. It just kind of wasn't. We got there, though. But, for the most part, it was like a...
Shadow of the Colossus kind of working against that idea.
Of course, yeah. But, like...
Exceptions, I understand.
Exceptions, and also, like... who was Shadow of the Colossus impacting? I would say younger people. That sort of. Well, that's a different audience from who Metal Gear was trying to reach. That was a different audience than who God of War was trying to reach. Shadow of the Colossus was like this weird in-between of all right, I'm old enough for not so colorful, whimsical games like a Sly Cooper and Ratchet and Clank and so forth, which are also in this era, which are also great, or Wind Waker, which is also in this era and also great, or whatever Mario was doing at this time. I'm a little older. I can handle something. More than all the stomping on Goombas. I can do more than stomping on Goombas. I can't handle these giant non-human creatures that are not cute to look at. I can handle stabbing them and killing them, but it's sad now. Oh, now I'm sad. That's the level of storytelling or emotional depth that we're going is. Oh, we're sad now. That. Oh, that didn't feel good. Is what we're dealing with there. And I think that player immediately jumps. In the next couple of years, immediately jumps into edgy God of War territory, and then is not able to reflect back on Shadow of the Colossus until later. I would argue. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, because it seems like Shadow of the Colossus is a product of its time in terms of how people talk about it. Because we played it recently, overrated in terms of how a lot of people would today consider it. But back in the day, it was getting 94s. It was getting 90 scores from the critics. So I think it was more a case of just art being put out into the world in the way they wanted to do it. Because Eco had already come out before that, I believe. Yeah. So it was just their style, and they didn't really concern themselves with demographics. Now, I agree that the byproduct of that could have been someone younger playing it, and all of a sudden being like, I actually think my brother was kind of like that when I watched him play it. It was, I feel bad about killing these people.
Yeah. Maybe you don't really know why you feel bad, but you feel bad. Yeah. These things. But also, look at the emotional depth of this, that we're talking about. You killed, for all intents and purposes, you killed a random animal.
Yeah.
You killed a wild animal for no reason.
No personality to it.
That's the depth that we're working with here is I did a bad thing and it made me feel bad, Now, you could argue that's the depth of even, The Last of Us or The Last of Us Part 2, but that continues to add more context, more layers of complexity that, again, I would argue, and to then counteract that 2005, 2009 era, that's when we start playing around with good and bad, evil and good choices in video games. And very often it was you are the most demonic, evil person of all time, or you're the patron saint. And there was no middle ground.
Yeah.
Last of Us, not single-handedly, but heavily contributed to that conversation of, well, what is the gray area? What is the middle ground?
Yeah.
Fallout was kind of trying to do that. The Elder Scrolls was kind of trying to do that. Their level of success can be kind of debated, in my opinion, but it's definitely there. You would get taking away from those games.
You would get a different emotional response from a Naughty Dog game where you nuked a bunch of people, as opposed to a Fallout game where you nuked a bunch of people.
That's a great point. That's a fantastic point.
It's not
or
the same
even
kind
a
of
Naughty
game.
Dog game where you killed one person.
Yeah.
Versus, yes, I am shooting nukes at whatever. And let's be honest, there's always a part in a Bethesda studios game, where you go, I don't care about this story, and you just start shooting people, And there's always the meme in Skyrim of how you tried to kill the kids. Yep. Everybody did it. Everybody went on a murder rampage and tried to kill the kids.
And then people made mods where you can kill the kids.
Exactly, right? That's just kind of the culture that those games cultivated.
Yeah. But to the grander point we're making, because clearly we're at the stalemate of, relatively the stalemate, 2015, 2020, 2000, 2005.
I want to get into 96 to 99.
It might just win. 96 to 99.
Yo, we are in a crazy era here because we're experimenting with 3D graphics. We're establishing the foundation of how 3 dimensions work, but we're also still working in that 2D plane and developing the best 2D games you possibly could. You're talking Castlevania Symphony of the Night. You're talking the prime 2D Mario games, which are very, very important. Early Zelda stuff is happening here. Right? When did the first Zelda happen? First Zelda happened real early, right? Yeah, real early. So I might be wrong here. But you're talking Super Mario 3, which is still heralded as one of the best video games of all time. Super Mario World, still heralded as one of the best video games of all time.
Foundational as well.
You're talking Final Fantasy VII. You're talking Metal Gear Solid. You're talking Mario 64. These games are the literal building blocks for what the medium is capable of today. Everything before this was hey, I can get pixels to move on the screen and we can make a cheap tennis game out of here. I'm making fun of Pong or pulling for Pong in this example, right? Or like, I can get a character to jump and move here, and you're getting early Mario, right? But there's also examples of a lot of games prior to this where they don't even really work.
So you're kind of got off in 1996.
Not a hard line, but I would argue. What happened in 95?
So
I never hear anything pre-96.
I think the greatest argument right now is that the 96 to 1999 era is the golden age, especially definitively if we're including 1995. Let me read off a couple games that came out not in the 95 range, 96 to 99.
Yeah.
Final Fantasy VII. GoldenEye 007. Super Mario World. Oh, no, not Super Mario World. I thought it was Super Mario 64, which did Super Mario 64, yeah. Half-Life, the very first Half-Life game. Ocarina of Time.
Banger.
Resident Evil.
Banger.
The original Resident Evil. Pokemon Red, Blue, and Yellow.
Bangers.
Crash Bandicoot.
Good.
Metal Gear Solid.
Banger.
Diablo, which, that's shut off a lot of things now.
Do we care about Diablo 1 so much? I always hear about
Less
2.
so. Yeah, 2's more important, but it started it. At least has some standing. System Shock 2, which would go on to develop a lot of games that would be based around that kind of horror type game.
Let's establish atmosphere. Let's establish world building. Yeah, things like that.
But probably even more impactful in terms of game development than World of Warcraft came out during this time. StarCraft. The RTS game where you had online was the crazy thing. You would go on and you'd play against people from anywhere around the world.
This is really the era where we start establishing genre.
You do, yes.
In this medium, right? This is where you start getting, here's an action game, here's a platformer, here's fuck, I lost it. Here's an RTS like you brought up. Here, like all of these different survival horror. Here's a survival horror game and stuff like that. Like this is where we really start establishing what this medium can kind of do, and we create the foundational building blocks for the greatness that we then get in the next era. Yeah. I almost want to say that the next era is going to fall short to is actually going to take a step back in my mind because they're so clearly like the inspirational jumping off points of what was established here.
Yeah, exactly.
Like I would argue this is the most important era of gaming. But is it the best? You're dealing with a lot of aged titles here, a lot of games that don't play so well today.
But some of them do.
Some of them do.
Like, for example, some fighting games. This big time came out.
Oh,
Street Fighter Third Strike.
Fighting games are so important.
Tekken 2, Tekken 3 came out during this time.
Dude.
It's just kind of... It's across multiple platforms and genres. Games are being hammered out, and we know what we're going to do. Once again, you are right. These even still aren't as playable as the 2000 games we were just talking about, or the ones from 2015 to 2020. But at that point, you can still enjoy a lot of these games, and definitively, it's more important than any of those eras. So that kind of has the best of both worlds to a degree. Less so on the playability side, but still. It's still there. It's still,
and I mean, like we're really hitting a lot of different like check boxes here. With like, storytelling. Obviously, not the most important part of games at this point.
It's the only part that's lacking, I think.
But we do have standout keystone titles again. Like me 5 minutes ago would argue, exceptions to rule here. But we have the beginnings of video games saying, well, how good of a story can we tell in a video game?
Exactly.
With Metal Gear Solid and Final Fantasy VII specifically, you start asking that question of, can video games tell a moving, emotional story? And the answer is clearly yes.
Yeah, of course.
And in some ways, it's even more gripping than what you feel from movies, television, books, music, etc. Like this medium really starts establishing its own identity. Anything before this era, I think you start getting a little tricky. I think the early 90s still have some titles that you can start looking at and go, of course, early Super Mario.
I can bring up a couple to give us a full thing. Here's some games that came out during that time. Street Fighter 2, which was even more foundational that was the most foundational Street Fighter, I believe.
When was this?
This is 1991. So this is 90s.
Yeah, Street Fighter 2, was the dominant fighting game until 2010.
Whenever, yeah, I guess so.
Like
it's hard to say for myself. Even.
It lasted almost like 20 years just off of the strength of that game alone.
You also got Crash, 1996. Compromising the last
Crash Bandicoot.
What
about it?
It came out in 96. So
yeah,
it involves in that era. I mean, some of these people
certainly helped in some like 3D platforming ways and so forth. But it kind of like Crash is like it's not taking advantage of the third dimension as much as some of the other titles.
I say mainly because of who Crash is. ask most people, they're going to say that's Crash.
The mascot era
yeah.
starts here. You know, I really super.
The mascot era started before this.
Well, I would.
Because that's when Sonic the Hedgehog came out. That's when Super Mario World came out.
I think you could arguably draw a direct correlation of these characters breaking into pop culture when they become 3D.
Yeah.
You know, Mario and Sonic a little bit of an exception here, but I would say like the idea of who Sonic is to the mainstream, of who Mario is to the mainstream, doesn't happen until 64.
Fair enough. Yeah. But, well, by that same token, he did save the gaming industry back in the 80s.
Oh, 100%.
So,
but what are we talking about here?
Yeah,
you know what
true.
level? You know, of course, you have to pay respect to these old games that built that did all of these things. You have to talk about Tetris and Pong and Pac-Man and all of these things and their effect. And of course, these are incredible foundational building blocks. Everything other than those, kind of crap.
In terms of what in the 90s. To
early 90s, and even when you start reaching into those...
Don't get me wrong. I'm not arguing for it.
Even in
I'm
those,
just saying...
well, at this point, I'm starting to talk, like, late 70s and the 80s, you know, so forth. Like, other than the ones who you still hear about today, everything else is kind of garbage, you know? No offense. You have to work through the muck to get to the gold, right? You got to dig through some crap to get to what you really, really need here. And so, like, those eras are very, very important to, like, figure out what not to do. What not to do is more important than you figuring out what to do.
Yes.
You know?
Which is why those have the greatest case for if you're viewing this from the perspective of, well, history should be prioritized. But I think you have to have the balance of the two. And playability, where you can easily make that argument for the 96 to 2000 to 99 titles, you can't really do it with those older games. Obviously, the Mario and Sonic games play fun. They play well. But as you said, you had to get through a lot of muck. And undoubtedly, most games there sucked.
Yeah. Like, you ever gone back and played the original Tetris? You know, or the original Pac-Man. It's like, all right, this is novel. Yeah, there's still some fun here. I'm not playing more than 30 minutes of this shit. You know, I'm moving on. Whereas, like, Tetris Effect today, like, I'll play that for like 3 hours straight, you know? Like, there's just something about that fidelity of movement and of gameplay feel that really got established in that late 90s and even into the early 2000s type thing, right?
Yeah.
And then...
I'm just naming off.
I just think the great grand experiment of interactive medium happened in that late 90s and early 2000s, right? And we kind of left that era, and I kind of wish we still stayed in that era. You just can't deny the level of quality and impact and
of the industry as a whole,
artistic punch that you started to get. I would argue in those mid to early teens, but really started getting that fucking ball rolling in those late teens, early 20s, right?
Sure, yeah.
Like, I just think the quality of game, the amount of content, the fidelity of the content is just on another level today than it ever was in the past. It's not fair to judge. I'm giving the crown to the late 90s.
I am too. And know what, Tavin? That'll have probably the most appropriate response from fans. I feel like that's the era where most people would also agree.
Yeah.
You know,
if you know what you're talking about.
Yeah, of course.
If you know what you're talking about.
I will also say Tomb Raider also came out in 96. Established that kind of game.
You know, action adventure, Indiana Jones type adventure type thing. Let's have some fun. Let's have some camp. Let's do all these crazy things. You know, and it's pretty well balanced by other titles trying to be more mature, trying to evolve the genre, trying to evolve the medium and so forth. You know, there's a lot of really great examples of just experimentation and evolution in this era. To me, if I'm to rank them, it goes late 90s, late teens, right behind it is the early 2000s, and then from there, take your pick.
I would only agree. I'm only agreeing with you because some of my favorite games came out in the 2010s. Dark Souls 3, Bloodborne, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth Remake, Fire Emblem Three Houses, Sekiro.
Most of the ones you just named are in my personal favorite era of gaming.
Yeah.
You know? So
it's a good time. Yeah.
It was so good, man. We got to cherish these moments when we have them. Because right now, it's good. It's good. I would probably rank this. Give me 2010 to 2015 over this era that we're in right now. Personally, probably. No. No, God, Baldur's Gate 3 is so
and Elden Ring
good.
and God of War Ragnarok
Yeah.
continue that story that people love. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, which
come
even
on.
improved
Tears
upon
of the
remake.
Kingdom.
Here's the Kingdom. Yeah, no. Honestly, I would say it's better than the 2006 to 2010s as well, just in terms of quality. No. Maybe no. I can't say that. Never
Didn't
mind.
I say that 05 to 09 era kind of sucked? 'Cause that was my take,
Yeah, but there's
right?
some good games, and there's more games.
There's
than
good
this
games in
current
every era.
but more than this current era. Like it's had more time to fill out and do more with the genre.
Name me the game that's better than Baldur's Gate 3.
Oh, I'm not going to say that. Well, because there isn't. But
There isn't.
I'm talking about that's one game though. I'm talking about. That's why I'm easily trying to say.
Name me the game in this era that's better than Elden Ring.
Okay, I'll give it to that.
Name me the game in this era that's better than Final Fantasy VII Rebirth.
Yeah, I'll take that. I'll do it.
There's a couple more titles I could do this with. Like we're just gonna keep going.
But I think we're kind of on the money. The late '90s is the golden age.
Oh,
of
for
gaming.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
And
kind of-
then
when
the
you start looking at the games,
inspiration,
it's just like,
the continued inspiration and exploration
Yeah.
in the early 2000s continued that trend. I just think we kind of not lost our way, but we just kind of figured out other things that figured out the multiplayer stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and and if we're having a multiplayer conversation, that era that I think is overall the worst era in the modern age, I think it's the least important era is that 05 to 09,
Yeah.
except when it comes to multiplayer. When it comes to multiplayer, it's arguably the most important.
So with all that being said, obviously not late '90s is on top.
Yeah.
We've kind of already almost ranked them by now.
Yeah.
So might as well.
Yeah.
Nine-
I think 15 to 20 is second.
The advancements and the continuation of the advancements from the '90s. I think
I'm willing to hear the
2007
conversation for the 2000s, but I'll also remind you the great thing about 15 to 20s is we're getting the best of both worlds. Incredible multiplayer titles and incredible single player titles.
we are, but from that same kind of perspective, similar, I should say. The 2005s and backwards. Those were the times when you had fun playing games, but also monumentally important games. Whereas as high quality as the new games can be, and their impact will be felt, it's not during a time where that impact is the same level as it was back in these time periods of the early 2000s and the late 90s. And so it's the melding of those two ideas. I really want to say, personally, 2015 to 2020. But in terms of like an objective standpoint, which is what we're kind of going for, it's like, that just had more growth. It was more important.
I agree with you, but I think also something to say for 15 to 20 is we start putting creator tools in the hands of the players. Now, this kind of also starts happening in earlier eras as well. Halo starts playing around with this. Little Big Planet starts playing around with this.
Minecraft. Which is
oh, fuck, man, the impact of Minecraft.
when did that come out?
That would be in the 10s to, oh, no, that'd be in like a late.
It's been around for a
that'd be
while.
like 09 or some shit, right?
Oh, I think it might be earlier. Okay. Why does it feel older than that? It feels way older.
Minecraft been around a long time.
Yeah.
You start seeing those creator tools, but I think they're really taking advantage when you start looking at, of course, Minecraft, Roblox, Fortnite. I mean, Lord alive, you can make your own video games now if you want to by just downloading a free-to-play game, and messing around in a different title.
Wasn't Fortnite 2014? I believe it was.
No, because PUBG came out 2017, right?
Jesus, sometimes games you get so ahead of me. If that is, that's crazy.
Fortnite was not 14. Fortnite was like 16, 17.
You'd think you'd be able to just find out quickly. 2017. Yeah, still, it feels so somewhat more recent than it actually is.
Yeah.
That does.
And I think you can counterbalance any impact Minecraft made by throwing in Fortnite.
Yeah. Well, yeah, Minecraft isn't on that part of era where I would say it's even better than early 2000s or 2015.
Yeah.
It's all 2000, 2005.
Yeah.
Because, again, Tavin, Metal Gear is in that era. 2
Listen,
and
man,
3.
Listen, man. I'm putting the early aughts right below this era, personally.
Oh, of course. It's going. These guys are.
I think
right
these two are neck and neck.
They're
right?
honestly interchangeable. You know what? I don't have.
We're settling on tie.
Yeah, I think so, because you can ask anybody, and I feel like even from an objective standpoint, you can argue either one of those.
Well,
definitively.
I would make the argument. Early aughts are just a continuation of what we got in the 90s, and the 90s are what's really important here, right?
Yeah.
And the aughts are just this expedited and exponentially like quality increasing era where we're just like, oh shit, we are really flexing and scaling up here, right? 2010 to 2014 didn't really give us a whole lot, but 15 to 20 took it and ran with it. So I think it's I in my brain, the aughts are standing on the shoulders of bigger giants, so it's easier for them to be impressive, right? Whereas the late teens are also standing on the same shoulders of giants, but they're coming off of an era that is way less impressive. So the advancements that they do make, I think, are more meaningful.
I see. Yeah.
Kind of splitting hairs at this point.
You are. I still think ultimately it could be. Usually we don't do ties like this.
I'm not mad. I'm not mad either way, really. But I would argue the 15. I would argue the late teens. It sounds like you're even leaning late teens as well. But
just because, I'm having to fight my own personal bias here, because that's my. Like I said, if I'm thinking in terms of that, the same way I more often do on the game club we do, I'd agree with you wholesale.
But listen, the greatest video game of all time happened in the early aughts. So
well, you say that.
No, definitively. As shown by that game club list, baby.
In an incomplete list. It is an incomplete list. So from there, I think it's pretty obvious. Early 90s to...
We can tie the early aughts in the late teens. From there, I go early teens, and then I go late aughts.
Early teens, and then late...
Yeah, so late aughts, so the
2009.
05, 09 era, 2010 era.
Not the early 90s, which was more foundational. I mean, at that point, it gets back to the same argument. But that's more foundational. Point. I mean, Mario games,
that's a good
as they are known.
Yeah. Well, I think we start.
You got Virtua Fighter. You got Street Fighter 2 that actually made Street Fighter,
yeah,
which pushed the entire genre.
You have such an establishment of what I mean. You have Xbox Live in this era, and
you
the
do.
early PlayStation Network stuff going on here.
And that's something
the
that's
rise
never going
of
away.
Call of Duty and Halo really did mean something. As much as gaming purists want to ignore the influence of Call of Duty. You wouldn't have multiplayer gaming in the way that you do in a competitive space like you do now.
You know what? I was kind of erring on the side of early 2000s, I'm going to give it the edge because of its historical significance in the realm of video games while still being playable. I think the playable aspect of the 2006 to 10 games kind of elevates itself above the importance of those early 90s games.
I would argue I think those games are less playable than what came before.
What's less playable? The 2006
6 to 9 or 6 to 10, wherever you want to draw that line. Those titles are less playable than 2000 to 2005.
I think that really depends on, because we were talking before about how you had to wade through a lot of bad stuff in the gaming industry in those early 90s, 80s, and whatnot. I see that as being the exact same case for the 2005s, 2006 to 2010s.
In that you have to wade through some garbage?
Yeah, but think about all that came out of it. Halo 3, the multiple Call of Duties that released during this time, which would be Modern Warfare 2, Black Ops
that puts it above the early 90s.
Yeah.
But, what was I arguing?
Yeah, that's what I was arguing.
We're arguing the early 90s here? Oh, okay, yeah. So you agree with me is what you're saying.
Wait, what are you saying?
I'm saying late aughts goes above early 90s.
Yeah, oh yeah, that's what I was saying too.
Okay, but it goes below early teens.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Early teens? It goes below that?
Yeah.
I get you had Last of Us and
Last of
Skyrim.
Us, GTA 5, Skyrim.
That's 3.
I mean, Minecraft came out in the era that I'm arguing against, but let's be honest, the real influence and impact of Minecraft happened in this era. May as well have come out in the early teens. You don't really start hearing about Minecraft till 2011.
When it reached the most audiences, but people were, it elevated to that point because everybody wanted to play it based off what was happening on the platforms they didn't own. Because everybody knew about Minecraft. I remember because I had a lot of our friends who were, itching at the bit to play Minecraft. They couldn't play it, and they were just constantly waiting for it. And this was also at school.
I was one of those people.
Yeah, exactly. And our school was like that too.
Yeah.
I remember people at our school were just, finally, Minecraft's playable. It's within my reach. And, what really has that same level of impact? Last of Us and Skyrim.
Wait, so you're still putting Minecraft in that 09?
Yeah, I definitely would. It came out that year.
I mean, yes, it did. But my argument is all of Minecraft's impact and influence happened in the next era.
That's true.
This is where we're getting weird, because it's the game came out and
and that's why it's I'm focusing on the release date because that's all null and void if it didn't come out in the first place, and it proved itself first before moving on to that.
the story of Minecraft is like true, like from the dirt, like,
Yeah.
you know, like, hey, I'm just this guy. I made a playable game. It's not really impressive at all. You can delete blocks and place blocks. That's all I got.
Which I think, yeah.
And then I'm gonna just keep building on that. And then they just kept building on that and building on it. And it was a snowball effect. It wasn't like it came out and was successful. It came out and some people were like, all right, this is kind of cool. And then they just kept adding to it and it became what it became later.
Mm-hmm.
Really the first real true example of that happening. I've lost the minutia of my own point at this point.
It's kind of hard to even, like we said, we kind of had a hard time defining the age.
Yeah.
So hard to rank them, even more so.
Baldur's Gate 3 is so good, isn't it?
It is.
That's what I just keep thinking about. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I think we're going to leave it at that one. You let us know where we should put the rest of them and just how shit the 70s are, bro. Let's be honest. That shit sucks. Tetris is fun, though. And make sure you let us know how you feel about each individual era of gaming down in the comments below. Make sure you share this with a friend and subscribe. Of course, this is the Two Penny Games cast. You can catch this every Tuesday, 8 a.m. Central Time, youtube.com/@2pennygames, and mainstream podcast services of your choice. We are also on TwoPennyGamesNews.substack.com, where you can read all of our articles and things that we read on the show there. Make sure you follow us there. Make sure you follow us on social medias. Follow us on TikTok, I guess. That's a dying platform, in my opinion. Maybe, possibly. I don't know. They won't let me re-download the app to see how we're doing on that app. So, you know, it is what it is. Until next time, have a great time. And Connor, say goodbye to the people.
I love you, Ankun.